All right, what is up? What is up? Hopefully, you guys are all ready to do this. So, yesterday we spent a little bit of time talking about some multiple choice. I have this link right here, which I was gonna, kind of take some of this and put it into our presentation. But honestly, I feel like I'm just gonna share it outright with you guys because it's this way it'll be a little bit more direct. Plus, there's some really cool stuff here about the FRQ. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Albert, but I don't think we don't have a Kahoot or anything planned tonight. Sorry about that. So none of that. But I do have some multiple choice questions we're gonna go through and look at together. And the focus tonight is I want to spend more time looking at the strategy behind answering the questions. So that's the main thing I'm looking at right now. Is I'm going to talk to you all about some tips for how to study for them, as well as how to go about answering the questions. Since we're so close, you guys honestly, in that sense, feel free to go to go to Kahoot. Go to Quizlet, look at some of these questions that people have put up. Most of them are pretty good, and practice that way. That would be a really good way for you guys to get a little bit of last-minute practice and learning vocab, preparing for multiple choice, all that. Also, most of you hopefully have some kind of a review manual, like the Princeton Review or the Barron's or the Kaplan's or whatever. Go through it. If you haven't already taken a practice test, make sure that you do that between now and Tuesday, because I think that would be a great way to get a little bit more exposure and look more at this stuff. So. All right, let's take a look real quick at the questions. Questions. Any questions y'all have about anything today, put them down here. I'm not going to lie. I don't think this is going to take a full 2 hours, but I'm willing to go that long if I have questions coming in. So, and if you can't ask me questions, or if there's something you might not be thinking about right now, write it down later tomorrow. And when we go for the CRAM session tomorrow, we will address those. So let's take a look. What is the difference between all the distance decay, friction of distance, gravity model type stuff? All right. So when we look at the distance decay, you're looking at the fact that the further away something is, the less that someone is likely to interact with it. And that's the case even on different scales, right? So you can look and say, if I'm looking for a job as a high school administrator, I'm probably going to look in places nearby. First in the county I work for. Then maybe in the district over a little bit further towards Columbia if I'm looking for something and I can't find anything where I'm at. What I'm not going to do is look for a job in Alaska, because it doesn't make sense. There's too many other places closer by. In your own room, in your own house, if you have multiple bathrooms, more likely probably to go to the one that's closest to wherever you are, right? If you're going for fast food and you want McDonald's, and you're probably going to go to the closest McDonald's rather than one that's super far away. So this right here is kind of what we're talking about with distance decay, all right? Friction of distance is, if you think about how friction is scientifically, it's a force that slows things down. So if you have a ball and you roll it really far, unless you're in a vacuum, that thing's going to stop at some point, right? So in the same way, the further something is, you're looking at the force is going to prevent you from getting there, okay? So it's going to be more difficult to travel further distances. So those things are very, very related. The gravity model is, when you think about, you can look at this at different scales too. You can look at when it comes to something like a restaurant, but you also, I think most of the time when you think about gravity model, you're looking at two big urban centers, okay? So the larger the population is, the more gravity it's going to have. And also, the less distance that exists between that urban center and another one, the more interaction there's going to be. So if you look at New York and Atlanta, both very large cities, not too terribly far away, there's going to be a lot of gravity between the two. In other words, there's going to be interaction between Atlanta to New York and even the other direction, all right? Because those are two very large urban centers. But if you look at something like New York and you look at Los Angeles, they're both super large urban centers. The distance is a little bit greater, so there might not be as much interaction. Still, again, if you look at something like Augusta, close to where I live in South Carolina, or I guess in Georgia is where Augusta is, and you look at, I don't know, some smaller town somewhere, let's say, I don't know, Macon, Georgia. All right, so those two places aren't too far away. So maybe that's not a really bad example, but they're actually way smaller in comparison size-wise than something like New York. So even though they're super close to one another comparatively, since the populations are so much smaller, there might not be as much interaction there. Still, if you look at a small town like Augusta and you look at something of equal size, halfway across the United States, there's going to be practically no gravity between the two. When we look at gravity in this sense, we're talking about any kind of interaction, whether it's a daily commute, whether it's people are going to travel here once a year or whatever it might be. Usually urban centers can use this formula to kind of determine how much interaction they're going to get, whether it's day to day, month to month, you name it. For example, Augusta is also where the National is played, right? So that just happened over what is our spring break. This whole area where I live and work, we all go on spring break in conjunction with the Augusta National because so many people in this community work jobs there and also, nearby community jobs. I used to drive for a limo service during the Augusta National. So during that particular week, you're going to see a huge amount of interaction here in Augusta. So the gravity of Augusta during that particular week would be substantially higher than any other week of the year. So that really does, that's really what we're looking at. And that I would say that of those things, the first two kind of make more sense. Gravity model, that's what we're looking at here, is basically the amount of interaction between two urban centers based on population and distance. All right. Can I please go over the epidemiologic transition? Yes. All right. So you guys know about the demographic transition model. It's a 4 or 5. Usually we're going to say 5-stage model where it shows literally how population changes. So when we say demographic transition, it's another way of saying population change, okay, over time. So with population change, which occurred mainly because of decreasing child mortality and increasing life expectancy, not because of more births, this is going to cause people over time to live longer, especially as the country begins to develop economically, which kind of correlates with stage 3 and then into stage 4 of the demographic transition model. So by the time you're in stage 4, you're in a really highly developed country like the United States. And in stage 5, you start to see a population decrease due simply to birth rates and death rates. You're going to have more deaths than births. At that point, population starts to decrease. So with the epidemiologic transition, people notice that at different stages of how population is going to grow, you're also going to start seeing different kinds of diseases or different kinds of epidemics that are going to plague people. And during the first stage, you have all these different old world diseases you hear about: smallpox, bubonic plague. It's called the age of pestilence. So you're going to see all these different kinds of diseases that today you don't hear about so much. And it has to do with a lot of them are bacterial. A lot of them today we've got some kind of vaccination for, or you can take antibiotics and prevent them from getting too terrible. I think there's like maybe 10 or 15 cases of bubonic plague in the world annually. That's not like an official statistic, but it's not much. As we transition into stage 2 of the demographic transition, that stage is also connected to this huge increase in urbanization. So people start moving from rural to urban areas, and when they did, there was all these industrial factories and all these different conditions. They weren't planning for these cities. They were just growing them up really, really fast. And we start to see lack of sanitation coupled with high population densities that cause different diseases having to do with like maybe pollutants and stuff. So you start to see this. Here's where you have a lot of cholera, for example, as people are moving and living in close quarters with one another. Water gets contaminated, and all these different kind of pollutants cause different diseases like cholera, which is actually literally crapping yourself, okay, to the point of death. It's like such profuse diarrhea that people would actually they would be dehydrated from it and die as a result, usually within a few days. So it's a really terrible way to die. If you guys remember a story about John Snow, the physician in London who kind of tackled the issue with cholera. There's also a great extra history video series. If you get a chance to look at that, it's about a 3-part series. The main ones I would spend time looking at is part 1 and part 3. If you want to see the stuff that we care about from a human geography standpoint, having to do with this story. But that's a really great video series there, and they do a bunch of other stuff as well. Yeah, Connor, I showed my students as well. It's pretty cool. It gets kind of long, so you gotta pick and choose what you're gonna watch. All right, so that's the okay. I'm not done yet. So stages 3 and 4, you start to see more of your degenerative diseases, stuff like heart disease, stuff like diabetes, and all this kind of stuff. It's mostly associated with people living long enough to get them. Right, so heart disease and different types of cancers and things like that didn't happen when people were dying on average at 50 years or so. But as people start living longer, they start to suffer more of these diseases more associated with older age. Another thing that you want to think about with these stages is that people sometimes will inflict these problems upon themselves. So you look at things like lung disease. It wouldn't be as available to people that didn't have access to enough money to buy things like cigarettes that are going to cause you to die. So a lot of things like that start to happen in stage 3 and 4. And then finally, in stage 5, you start to see what they call, I think they call it the reemergence of some of your old world diseases. And you could make arguments right now that maybe in some ways we're kind of getting to that. When you think about in the news right now, it's the measles, right? I mean, you've got this resurgence of the measles because people aren't getting vaccinated and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, it's the highest, most unprecedented rates of measles cases in the history of our country over the last 25 or 30 years or something unbelievable like that. So we start seeing things like this. A few years ago, it was Ebola, which would be something similar to one of these stage 1 diseases. And so things like that. I don't really know exactly how we feel about stage 5 in terms of that model, or what maybe causes some of these diseases. Maybe there is some kind of we lose some degree of immunity might cause some of them to come back. I mean, I guess that's still, we would be living in that stage right now. So it'd be something that would be more like a work in progress in a way. All right, well, that's the most important urban land use models we need to know. All right, so we looked at this a little bit at the tail end of, hang on, let me take a look. We looked at this a little bit at the tail end of the review on, when was it, Thursday? Let me share my screen with you guys. All right, so let's see, let's go down a little bit lower here. I think it ended with the models on Thursday. I'll just kind of recap some of those real quick right here. So all right, so in short, you definitely want to know the North American models. So the concentric zone model, the sector model, and the multiple nuclei model, I would say, are the most important. You also need to know the galactic city model, also known as the peripheral model, which is like an extension on the multiple nuclei created by the same guy, Harris. Harris Ullman. All right, so you want to know those 4. All right, and then after that, you really want to know the Latin American model, the Ford Griffin model is what that one is, and we'll take a look at that real quick. And it is in the course description that you guys should know, be familiar with the Asian city and African city model and all that. So let's look at them real quick, just kind of in passing, because we spent some time on Thursday looking at them. I don't want to spend too much time reviewing that, but it is important, and you guys are asking about it. So when you look at the concentric zone model, notice that when we talk about concentric circles, we're literally talking about like circles or different zones that have circles that would be, I guess, the equivalent to what parallel lines are. They never really touch. They're just these circles around circles around circles. That's what concentric circles are. So when we look at the concentric zone, or what we're looking at here is that Burgess, the guy who creates this model, sometimes we see it called the Burgess model. He believed that you had the central business district, and after that you would have these concentric zones that kind of eventually people are going to spread out from that CBD based on maybe opportunity or how much money they may have or income or demographic, whatever it might be. So in the first zone around the CBD, you got what they call the transition zone, and there it is. The transition zone is going to be a place where you got both poor people housing as well as actual factories and things like that people are going to work. So the poor need to live nearby. They can have 4 different types of transportation, and they have to live pretty close to where they work. As you get a little further out, you're going to see the zone of independent workers' homes. So these guys are still probably not what we would consider the middle class of today, but they are well enough. They don't have to live near the city center. They can still live pretty close to where they work, but they can live in places that are not part of this transition zone. Then you've got your zone of better residences, and this here would be where the maybe the what we would consider a middle class to kind of live outside of the hustle and bustle of the city. You have to be able to afford to live out here, and as well as to get back in the city if you need to do any kind of business. And then finally, the commuter zone, which is where a lot of your richer people will live on larger areas of land, which is less expensive. The further out it is, they can build ginormous houses like the one you see here in the model and live further away from the city center. Now, remember, at the time that Burgess is creating this model, he's looking at the late 1800s, early 1900s, and at that time, the city center was still very much an industrial one. So factories and poor people were more associated with the city center. The further out you get, the better houses and the richer you are. All right, so then after that, you've got the Hoyt sector model, Homer Hoyt being the person that creates this. And rather than having concentric circles, you're looking at these different sectors. All right, so again, the CBD is in the dead center. All right. Then next to the CBD, just like in the concentric zone, this here was like the 1930s or something. So you got still an industrial core, or industrial CBD. The people that work there are going to live close. So I think the sector 3 here is your low class residential. You've still got your factories kind of also forming their own sectors along the CBD. So people are going to live close to where they work still. Then you've got some of your middle class housing on the sides near the CBD, extending all the way to the edge of the city. And then finally, sector 5 is going to be your rich, elite, high class residential. Both the concentric zone and the Hoyt model were kind of modeled after what these guys believe Chicago was doing. All right. So also, these sectors kind of correlate with the invention of rail cars as a form of transportation. So people would actually, have rail cars converge in the CBD, and then they would be able to extend that transportation mode further out, which would cause these sectors of growth from the CBD all the way out to the edge of the city. So that's the reason why you've got this. And then the next model would be the multiple nuclei model. Now, one thing I want to point out about these models is the different shapes and the placement of the wedges and all that. They really don't make that much of a difference. And these are models, so we're not looking at something that's supposed to show exactly how everything is, but how everything kind of is when you factor in all these different geographic components. So again, it's not exact science, but it does help to demonstrate the phenomenon that's discussing. In the multiple nuclei model, again, you've got this CBD, which is my purple here, and then you've got low-class housing nearby, as well as different types of manufacturing, wholesale and light manufacturing. The big blue area here is going to be your middle-class housing, all right? The pink area over here is your high-class housing, again, further away from the CBD. But then you've got these little places like this outer business district, which is kind of centered between middle class and the high class. You might have things like retail there that now people don't have to go to the city center to get it. You might also have your industrial suburb or your heavy manufacturing kind of on the outside of the city. And the reason why that's structured this way is because of transportation, right? So in this case, you're looking at combustion engines. In other words, modern gas-powered engines and cars that allowed for more people to have accessible transportation to places not along these rail lines that you would see in the sector model. So people could just go wherever they wanted to, and cities began to adjust accordingly. So that's the reason why you would have all these different nodes, more or less, or these multiple nuclei in various parts of the city, centered around, whether or not you got rich people or middle class or whatever it might be. As an extension to the multiple nuclei model, you have the fourth of the main ones. The question was about the main ones here. The fourth would be the Galactic city model, also made by Chauncey Harris, who is the author or co-author of the multiple nuclei model. Right. So what Chauncey Harris does in this case was he noticed that in the late 60s, 60s, 70s, and all that, you have cities like Atlanta. Here it is. That have these beltways going around it. Okay. And places where you might have airports or different types of shopping malls, they became such large suburban areas that would then be kind of anchored by maybe an interstate or the mall itself or office space, whatever it might be. And they began to take on the properties of a CBD. And so these different nodes along these beltways and interstate intersections became known as edge cities. And this is also the reason why sometimes it's called the peripheral model. It's because these cities emerged on the periphery of the larger city. So it's very similar in concept to what's happening with the multiple nuclei model, but kind of like the next level of that. So I mean, when I say these are edge cities, they're big, like they look like actual cities themselves, but are really still part of the larger city structure itself. All right, so aside from that, and that's another image of the Galactic city model from the book. The next one is the Ford-Griffin model, also known as the Latin American city model. And this here is what it looks like. Now let me make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so this, hopefully that's going to load. It's going nice and slow, isn't it? All right, so this here is the Ford-Griffin model created by Ford and Griffin. And notice that it looks kind of like the sector model, right? Maybe a mix between the sector model and the concentric zones. So you got your market and your CBD. Market and CBD are kind of in the same place. When we talk about market, it's the same kind of market you would think, place where people are going to go buy stuff. The CBD actually has this kind of a spine and mall associated with it, which again is going to be kind of like a place where people can go to buy stuff. So it's a commercial spine. Because it's a place that's more of a commercial spine, you're going to have the elite residential sector right over both sides of it. So rich people are going to live among the people among the CBD and the commercial area surrounding it. Now here's where the heart of the city is going to be. The economic core of the city is right here. Then, oops, didn't mean to do that. Then you've got these zones on the outside. The yellow here is going to be the zone of maturity, and then the purple is the zone of C2 accretion. I don't know if I say that right or not, but what it is, it's kind of like a transition zone where you're going to have people that are mostly poor, but not like ridiculously poor, living in houses that are mostly actual structures and not just thrown together ramshackle houses like you would see in the periphery. But so everything from the purple on out, these aren't very rich individuals. These are relatively poor people. This is your disamenity, and your periferical are going to be people that live in squatter settlements on the outside, on the periphery of the city. So we talk about squatter settlements being places, sometimes you can call them squatter settlements, you can call them shanty towns, you can call them favelas. It's a bunch of just thrown together housing that follows no particular code or no particular rules. Usually the land's not owned by the people that live there. Sometimes they might have access to electricity and water, and sometimes they don't. So this here is going to be something that plagues cities in developing worlds, period, like especially some of these fast-growing ones like Lagos. But we look at just the Latin American city model here. Yeah, that's what you're looking at. Any of the kind of orangey yellow color here is going to be squatter settlements. All right, and then obviously you've got your middle-class residential is going to be this, again, close to the commercial spine. So the key difference here between the Ford-Griffin model and some of the ones we looked at before is that it's reversed, right? The richest people live near the city center, and the further out you go, the poorer you're going to be. And that's the opposite. When you look at any of the other models we just discussed, you got your poorest people kind of in the center and your richest ones kind of on the outside. All right, the African city, just to kind of cover it really quick, is again, you've got this colonial CBD. There's a lot of imperialism, a lot of colonial influence here. So you've got the place where you will have the colonial CBD, and then around that you have your market, like a bazaar kind of market. So people set up shop in the street and sell nearby. And then you got your what they would call the traditional CBD. So essentially, you got your CBD in your market in the center of the city, and then after that, different types of ethnic and mixed neighborhoods. In other words, there's a lot of diversity in some of these urban areas. You've got your what they would call informal satellite townships on the outside. I'm not 100% sure what that is, to be honest, but that's what you're looking at in terms of the structure here. I want to say these informal satellite townships would be almost like small villages or small little farming areas nearby enough to the city that they count, but kind of out from away a little further from the city center. Mining and manufacturing zone is going to be in there as well, somewhere between the ethnic neighborhoods and the informal satellite township. So when you think about this, one of the main differences here is going to be the fact that you've got this market, this bazaar kind of market, where people from the outside will come in to sell the goods. Also, the colonial legacy here. Let's see what my notes say. Sub-Saharan Africa is the least urbanized area of the world. It's the fastest urbanizing area. It says, most rapidly urbanizing. So right now it might be the least urbanized, but as most people live in rural areas and most people are still farmers there, but know that it is also the fastest urbanizing one currently. No cities to match, no large cities to match Cairo. These different cities here are established by Europeans. That's probably not going to be the case for long, though. And then lastly, your Asian city model. Again, the influence of colonial, you've got the port zone. These are going to be all kind of along a port. And you will have had your port zone here, your alien commercial zone where Europeans will have done business with people in this area when they're selling stuff. These will have been more like your what do they call them? Like your spheres of influence. So you didn't see a bunch of colonialization. People didn't actually live here. They will have done business and left for the most part. You got your government zone, your high class zone. These are all going to kind of follow this one stem here. Middle density residential zone, right? Zone of new suburbs and squatter areas. So basically places that are going to be kind of like the periphery of your Latin American city. And then after this, you've got some farming kind of on the outside, right? So it's hard to say what you need to know, what you don't need to know about these specific models. I haven't seen a whole lot of questions about these ones here, and if I've seen them, they've been relatively surface deep. Definitely this one and the North American models are the ones you're going to see the most on the test, unless that's how I feel about it personally. So most of the time I spend a lot more time going over the first 5 North American models as well as your Latin American model there. All right, so let's look back at my questions and see how many more I've got. I got a few. Let's answer just a few more, and then we're going to talk about multiple choice and I'll finish up. So I'm going to say I'm done with that one. Send us link for these multiple choice questions, any slides we plan on going through. I don't have a Kahoot raise, so we definitely can't do that for sure. The slides are shared in the previous reviews that I did, the cumulative reviews. So all I'm looking here is I've got the ones pulled up, and I also shared them last night. So they're the exact same ones that I shared. I really don't want to have to take the time to do that right now. Maybe towards the end I can do that. But definitely go back and look at those earlier ones. You guys are all 5.0 plus. If you're here with me tonight, you should be able to access those slides from the earlier reviews, the recordings. Let's see. So you said we would not use the whole 2 hours. Can we do a Kahoot? You guys really want to do this Kahoot? I'd have to dig one up. So yeah, Danny, the ones from the FRQ review are the exact same ones I got out right now. I haven't made any new ones for this. Let's put it that way. And yeah, and actually, the ones that I did, the cumulative reviews, are kind of like an abbreviated version of the ones I did all year. So if you're looking for something a little bit deeper on a topic, go back to where I talked about that in one of my regular Thursday reviews, and you might see a little bit more detail. It definitely might be worth looking for if you're looking for like a particular topic. And I think that my titles are pretty good at helping you determine where those things might be. Was a superimposed boundary. All right, so a superimposed boundary is going to be a kind of boundary that is placed over an area by somebody else. So if you look at Africa, the boundaries today that mark where individual African countries are were superimposed by Europeans that kind of unilaterally decided where the borders are going to be without any input from Africans on the subject. So this is the reason why, if you look at the like a map that shows the ethnic boundaries in Africa, and they're super diverse, and then you look at a map that shows where the modern countries are kind of on top of one another, they don't add up one bit. And so it causes a lot of problems that you hear about in Africa with civil wars and ethnic diversity and some of the genocides and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of related to that in a way. All right, so I've got some questions here. I want to look at those. Sorry about my kid, y'all, if y'all can hear her. I want to first look over stuff about the multiple choice, because this isn't really going to take me that long to go through, but I definitely want to make sure that I do it justice, and I also want to make sure we have time to apply what we look at here at a few examples that I've dug out of a few of my review manuals. Now, people are asking me to share the multiple choice questions that I've got here, and I don't know if I can do that because they all come from a couple of the review manuals. Mostly the 5 steps to a 5, like the list of 500 questions. Some of y'all may have that. Also, some of them I think come from the Princeton Review Manual. So I'm not like digging up super secret stuff here, but I definitely don't feel like sharing it without, since I don't, they're in those manuals. But even still, you're going to see them here in just a minute. So I'm on I shared this link earlier, the Albertio website. This here is another AP review type thing that does AP reviews for human geography as well as other different types of reviews. I'm going to put this down here in the call to action so y'all can see what I'm looking at if you want. Here we go. Tips. The reason why I want to share this with you is because it's not only looks at multiple choice, which is our focus, but it also kind of reviews some stuff that we looked at from having to do with the FRQ. Let me see if I can pull this. Oops. So I'm going to shrink it down just a little bit so I can get to my bar here. But if I pull this down just a little bit, you're going to see down here some tips. Oh, that's multiple choice. You're going to see down here some tips having to do with the FRQ. Right? It goes over some of the terms y'all were asking about last night. The analyze, assess, evaluate, identify, define, explain, discuss, different things you might be asked on the FRQ. So that might be helpful to kind of go through, look at, and review. Just a little bit about what we talked about last night, as well as possibly some more. So maybe we can look at that towards the end. But my main focus here is the multiple choice. So I'm going to go back up there. I just wanted you guys to have access to all of this. It's pretty good stuff. Let's see. All right, so I want to talk to you about some of this stuff, and then I'm going to look at share with you all a few of my tips, personal tips, and then we're going to look at some examples. So you got the specific themes. This here is a breakdown. Some of y'all asked me about this last night. I didn't have the exact percentages, but I was like somewhere around 14 to 16%. Notice that Unit 1 is less. Unit 1 is 5 to 10%, but don't be deceived because there's a lot of Unit 1 in all these other topics. So you're not going to see questions directly related to just Unit 1, but you might see questions that seem Unit 1-ish that kind of also center on some of these other topics throughout the course. So just make sure that you know it all, but definitely spend most of your time studying these concepts here in Units 2 through 7, because those are the ones you're going to see the most. I do think personally that usually they're a little bit Unit 7 heavy on the multiple choice, at least from what I've seen in the released exams. We've gone through before and looked at that. Let's see, is there not going to be political geography on here? Yeah, there is. That's what you're looking at for the political organization of space. So it's going to be, again, between 13 and 17% of the test. So yeah, it's all there. It's all there. Keywords and commands in the question. Sometimes you'll see questions that say except or best or not or all. I mean, usually the one of these that I think you need to really pay attention to is except. And even sometimes when I'm going through a question and I see one of these except questions, I'm thinking, dang, they all sound like they might be the right answer. And even I'd get confused and second guess myself if you don't see these particular. You guys, man, y'all want to play some Kahoot. We might give it a shot. All right. Let's see. Don't skip any questions. All right. So this here is a really good point. I'm glad it's here in case I would have forgotten to tell you this. So you don't want to skip questions. At best, you might want to maybe make a mark in your book next to a question you want to go back and revisit. But you don't want to skip questions because if you skip 1 or 2 and the next thing you know you skip 8 or 9, you're going to have to go back and remember where those questions are. And you might not have time because remember, you got 60 minutes to answer 75 questions. That's going to take you about 50, 51, 52 seconds per question. So if you get stuck on one, it's going to be really, really difficult to go back there and find those specific questions. So don't skip questions. At best, like I said, write a little note on the side and come back to it if you have time. Also, if you start to run out of time, and you've got questions left, like 7 or 8 questions you can get to, pick a letter and go all the way down the list with that one letter. Now, don't just Christmas tree it and guess B, A, C, E, D, D, B. Pick one letter and go through, because statistically, you're going to get a few of those right. And you don't lose points for missed items. You only gain points for correct ones. So definitely something you want to think about there. A really good point. All right. Take lots of practice tests. You don't have a whole lot of time for that at this point, but you do have things like Kahoot and Quizlet and stuff like this you guys can do in small groups, or however you want to do that. I would definitely recommend still going through and doing this. If you haven't got all the practice questions done in your review manuals, go through and take those practice tests as well. This will also help you kind of know what you need to focus on in terms of what you might be weakest at. People asked me this last night and the night before, but you don't want to spend all your time studying stuff you already know. Study stuff that you need the most work on. That's where you're gonna get the most points at this point on your studying. Don't spend too much time on any one question. I can't stress this enough. You don't want to spend some of the questions you can get through in a few seconds. Some of the questions you might have to take more than 50 seconds. What I'm saying is that on average, you have about 51, 52 seconds per question. So if you get stuck on one and you're dwelling on it for several minutes, you're running the risk of not finishing. So definitely at this point, you're going to put something down, make a little mark if you want to come back to it or not, and then move on. And I'm going to talk more about that in a second, because through using process of elimination, usually, I'm going to say not all the time, but usually you can narrow down your response to maybe 2 or 3 responses. So if you take what would have been a 20% chance of just a random guess, and you narrow it down strategically to, now you've got 3 choices, you've increased your odds of just randomly guessing by 13%, which is a pretty huge increase of odds if you ask me. So always want to use process of elimination. We're going to talk about that. Different types of multiple choice questions. This is one I would have thought to tell you had not been for me looking here. So this one here might be beneficial, but you've got different kinds of questions, and some of them are easier and harder. You've got definitional. This is part of the reason why you want to spend time learning terms. Now, again, learning terms isn't enough if you can't apply those definitions, but you definitely want to learn vocab. So most of y'all have probably done some kind of vocab work with your teacher. Maybe you've created some multiple flashcards or whatever it might be, and we will come back up here and look at these in a moment and answer the questions. You also have cause and effect type questions, sequencing, okay, generalization, solution, hypothetical thinking. All right, how about this? As we're going, well, let's skip that just for a second, and let's finish up looking at the list, and then we'll go back up there and answer those questions together. Writing your own multiple choice questions out of the terms, for example, might be something that you guys can do because you're using higher order thinking if you're doing that, right? For number 8, interpreting charts and graphs, maps, different types of illustrations, different types of pictures, right? It's really good to know how to interpret that stuff. Again, if you're looking at the day before the test and you have no idea, and you haven't looked at a lot of that, it might be kind of an uphill battle. Not all of the questions are going to be like this. But what I'm going to tell you right now is you definitely want to take the time to analyze these maps and charts. Those are some of the questions there you might want to really kind of slow down, look at what's being asked, and then look at what the chart's showing you before you just kind of rush to a decision about what it might be. So that's definitely something you're going to want to do. And you will see some kind of charts. Usually you'll see a lot of pictures. You might see a picture of a mosque, or you might see a picture of a holy site. You might see a picture of a sign. Last year on the FRQ, there was a sign that the sign is actually showing gentrification, or it's like a protest picture or something like that about gentrification. So things like that you will see on the test as well. And then when you're going through, take some notes on some of the questions you might have. Or if you're working with a partner, if you're doing a Kahoot, take notes on the questions that you missed, and then go back and make sure that you guys are able to answer them. It also mentioned here to take meaningful notes, so write it in a way that you're going to be able to go back and study it later on. And then the rest of the stuff, teaching it to friends or family members, that might be something worth doing a study group tomorrow if you get a chance, but really this is something that would be more beneficial with more time than what we've got at this point. and then also read questions and think of the answer. All right, so that's just a basic strategy anyway. I mean, you always want to take the time to consider. You want to make sure that your answers are accurate. All right, you definitely don't want to read two distractors and say, okay, well, I know this is the answer, so don't read on any further. I mean, sometimes you can do that, right? But remember that there might be a best answer. So there might be other answers that will work, but there might be a best answer that would be the answer to the question. So you always want to make sure that you read all of the distractors. All right, so let's go back up here and look at some of these questions and kind of get a feel for this, and then we'll look at some other questions. Now, one of the things I told you is process of elimination. So let's look at this question. Definitional. You guys can put your responses in the comments. How does that sound? According to the central place theory, the threshold is defined as the economic base, the distance away from a central place, the gross value of the product minus the cost, the minimum number of people needed to support a service, or the point at which consumer movement is at minimum. And yes, looks like we're all in agreement. It's definitely going to be D here for this. The other part of the theory we looked at was range, right? The range is going to be a distance. The threshold is the minimum number of people that you need to support it. All right. So good job on that, y'all. Cause and effect. As a country becomes increasingly developed, economic activities become dominant in which sector? Seeing a lot of B's, yes. When we talk about sectors, we mentioned primary agriculture or anything that's being extracted, right? Secondary is going to be manufacturing. Tertiary is going to be anything services, right? So in countries like the United States, here I am providing the service. Y'all, I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm useless when it comes to farming and making stuff with factories. So the only thing I got going for me is teaching. So if I couldn't do that, and that is a service, then y'all, I would be totally screwed. So I said it before, I'll say it again, services ain't going to help us all that much. I mean, maybe a few, like if you're a doctor, but they won't help in the zombie apocalypse. Some of you got to have enough money to be able to spend on it. Sequencing. All right, let's see what that means. Which of the following correctly lists the four major ancient culture hearths? Okay, let's take a look. Seeing a little bit of mixed reviews here. All right, A, Central Asia, Ethiopia, Indonesia. Sorry, so we can already look and say, so let's practice the process of elimination. We know it's not A because we know that Ethiopia and Indonesia aren't aren't part of the four. All right, let's see. Part B, Central Asia, India, Nile Valley, Southern Europe. We know Southern Europe's not one, so we can use process of elimination. A and B can't be the answer. Okay, so C, Egypt, the Mekong Valley. Where is that? Middle East. We know Middle East is Mesopotamia is in the Middle East. Is Western Africa one of these? No, so we can knock C out as well. Ethiopia, we've already said isn't one. So the answer, without even reading E, has got to be E, right? Indus Valley, Mesopotamia, Nile Valley, and North China. If you look at a map that shows where the Yellow River Valley was, it would have been kind of on the northern part of what we consider China today. So good job, y'all. And y'all understand how I would have used the process of elimination there? Generalization. It's generally agreed that the current trend in climate change is caused by, what's y'all's answer? Yeah, pretty easy question there. Now, you can look. Now, here's an important question, because remember I just now said that there could be a best response, okay? Look at this one here, D, tilt of the Earth's axis. You guys study this in maybe environmental science or some kind of a science class or even geography class? Yes, the Earth kind of wobbles on its axis, and sometimes that has led to global cooling and global warming periods. But the best answer here, would be increased use of fossil fuels, because if you look at the charts, yes, you can say maybe it's the Earth's tilt, but the changes in the Earth's climate has been so much more dramatic since the Industrial Revolution. That's really what we're looking at there for the answer to the question. So there might have been two right answers, but there's one that's definitely the best. So which of the following is an example of a supranational organization with the main mission of increasing economic integration? What do y'all think? So it might be a little bit tougher. Seeing a lot of B. Right. So B is the correct answer. Yes, European Union is absolutely a supranational organization centered on creating economic integration. Right? They did be more competitive with large markets like the United States and China and all that. Why would it not be A? What kind of supranational organization is A? Anybody remember? Good job, Evan. NATO was the answer to the Warsaw Pact. It was a group aligned with the United States during the Cold War period to kind of compete with the Communist Pact, which would have been known as the Warsaw Pact. Very much a political one. The United Nations is a political one. This is not a supranational organization. The Fed is, some people kind of jokingly call it the fourth branch of the government, but this here is the federal bank. It's a big deal, but it's not a supranational organization. It's part of the United States. The hypothetical situation. All right, let's look at this. If 4 languages have similar words for numbers and the names of fish, but different names for a certain disease, what might be concluded about the time? Okay, this one here is an interesting question. Let's see if I can get the thing on the screen. Hopefully you guys can see this. I know it's going to be kind of small. Let me shrink it down one more time. All right, can y'all see that okay? What's the answer here? Oh, wrong way. If 4 languages have similar words for numbers and the names of fish, but different names for a certain disease, what might be concluded about the time at which the disease first diffused? All right, so let's see. The disease spread among the population that later divided and evolved into 4 different languages. The disease. But here's the thing, is that they all have a different name for that disease, okay? So if the disease spread among a population that later divided, they would all have the same word. Can it be A? B, the population was divided and evolved into 4 different languages, and then the disease spread. So they wouldn't have known a word for it prior to the linguistic divergence. That's the word we're talking about. Right off the bat, I can tell you that the answer is going to be B. But let's look at the other ones anyway, because I think it's a good idea to read them if you're not sure. The disease spread to 2 different populations that later divided. Nope, not possible. The disease and language spread to 4 different regions at the same time and the same rate. Okay, that would have been great, but they still wouldn't have had the same word for it because he would have had to individually invent the word. And then E, there can be no conclusions. Well, there can be conclusions. So the best answer to this one is definitely B. And good job, you guys who got that one right. That was just a little bit tougher. And again, that right there is what we call linguistic divergence. In other words, the language and the people are going to kind of diverge or split off, which is going to cause language to be a little bit different over time. That's what happened with the Indo-European languages. And actually, this is the same process they use to piece those languages together and discover the similarities. That's how they understood the differences, I guess the similarities between all of the Indo-European languages. Words like father and mom and sister are all going to have the same basic root. All right, compared with the more developed countries, which of the following statements is true of less developed countries? Let's see, all right, so compared to which of the following statements is true of less developed? All right, so the higher percentage of labor force engaged in food production. The population pyramid exhibits a narrower base. Nope, definitely not. The per capita consumption energy rate is higher. Definitely not. By the way, the United States has the highest per capita energy consumption rate in the world, and we're not poor. The natural increase is low. Nope. Fertility rates are no. No. So the answer is most definitely going to be A, absolutely, because we know that most people in these poorer countries, in particular in sub-Saharan Africa, we're just talking about, they are mostly farmers, okay, mostly subsistence farmers that only grow enough food to take care of their family, and maybe they sell just a little bit so they can pay for more food to take care of their family the next year. Which of the following is a characteristic of American suburbs? All right, now this one here, I honestly don't think that you're going to see questions. I was told that you didn't have questions like this anymore on the AP exam. In fact, I took it so seriously that I went in and changed all my personal questions to reflect just one answer. I didn't have any of the both A and B kind of things. You guys are saying E. Let's take a look. Many suburban developments are eating up agricultural land. Yes, that's true. B, some suburban areas have developed small cities within themselves. We just talked about edge cities, right? C, many of the inhabitants of suburban areas participate in gentrification as they flee cities for quiet lifestyles. All right, you guys are saying E is the answer, so all of them. You guys know what gentrification is? Where does that happen? Where does gentrification happen? And the answer is D, because your gentrification occurs in cities, right? Many of the inhabitants in suburban areas participate in gentrification as they flee cities. So no, people in these suburban areas are actually part of the process. So they're going into the city in these gentrified neighborhoods. They're being kind of or remade to maybe tear down old factories or tear down old businesses and build up new coffee shops that attract, you know, more upper class, usually maybe white inhabitants that come in. Property values increase substantially, and then the people that live in those areas are forced out due to not being able to afford to stay there anymore. That's what gentrification really is. All right, so this next one. All the following statements about geography of meat production in the United States and Canada are true except. All right, so here is one of those I was telling you that's a little bit confusing to me. So let's read it carefully. Let me shrink it down a little bit so we can see. And you guys tell me what you think the answer is. I can get a little bit, it's a long one. All right, so let's see. You guys are saying, here's a few there. Let's watch language, please. Watch language, please. All right, so A, industrial farmers are raising ever-increasing numbers of animals on their farms. That's true, right? So we know that that can't be answered because remember, we're looking for 4 true responses and 1 that's not true, right? B, animal slaughtering and meat processing activities are dominated by a few large corporations. Think about this. You guys watch TV. You've got places like Tyson Chicken. You've got different types of. I would say that sounds pretty true to me. So we can say we will leave B in there as true. We can say maybe B and A aren't going to be the answer. C, the development of the poultry industry has made chicken the least expensive kind of meat consumed. I'm not a really big guy, but I'm pretty fit, and believe it or not, I do spend a lot of time lifting weights and studying nutrition and things like that. Chicken is probably the best thing for the buck when it comes to cheap protein that has not a whole lot of other crap in it. So I'm going to say I think that there's probably pretty true as well. Fast food restaurants have created demand for increased standards and homogeneity of animals. You look at McDonald's, you look at Burger King, even other places like Chick-fil-A, and all these different places are going to try to emulate that. I'd say that's probably pretty true too. Consumer demand for organic foods has significantly decreased the amount of meat produced by most agribusiness firms. Y'all think the answer is E, right? Because I do not think that we have really decreased the amount of meat that we demand. If you look at I can't remember what the name of the organization is. The U.S. The food people, the organization over the food to be eat. I feel stupid. I can't remember what it is, but they were just coming out again recently saying that while maybe there is a FDA, exactly, FDA, absolutely. Thank you, y'all, for bailing me out of that. They were saying that maybe food production or meat production maybe has gone down or kind of stymied a little bit, but that we still could afford to eat less meat. Meat industry is kind of a big deal. It's also a big producer of carbon emissions. And so there's always kind of an attack on this. And whereas you have seen organic foods and organic farming increase substantially, it's still very, very small in comparison to other industries having to do with agriculture in the United States. So this right here is one that honestly I probably wouldn't have known had not been from exposure of some of these geographic concepts, simply by doing stuff like watching the news, listening to articles, and reading a lot. Okay, so that's a question that I feel pretty confident is the answer is going to be either. That would be my best guess. But if you have no idea, this right here would be one that you would want to use process of elimination. You know that it's not A. All right, I would say that we know it's not B. I would even probably say that D sounds pretty obvious when you think about what fast food is. There's a million McDonald's, there's a million Burger Kings, there's a million Crystals, and all these different places you can go and get basically the same kind of food. So it makes sense that all these foods would be standardized, right? So that would bring you to C and E. And just by In-N-Out, you're right, we don't have that in South Carolina, but I've heard great things. Now, here's the thing, is that choosing between two responses gives you a 50% chance of getting the question right. Even if you have no idea, you've increased your odds by a huge amount, from 20% to 50%, just by crossing out the ones you know it can't be. That's a really good test-taking strategy, because remember, the point isn't to make 100 on this test. The point is to get as many points as you can so you can make a 4 or a 5, get that college cred, get that AP cred, and go brag your friends with how good you did on the test. All right, last one. A bunch of these, you're going to see graphs and charts and things like this. On the map, which one of the following boxes, let me make this bigger so you can kind of hopefully see it a little bit. And I did share y'all the link in the call to action. Didn't I put that there? I don't see it now. Did I give y'all this? All right, so yeah, okay, good. So you guys should be able to see that. So I know it's really, really small. On the map above, which one of the following boxes is in an area where the population density is high and the level of economic development is low? Here is one of those. Yesterday, people were asking me about, what do I need to know in terms of the countries and the capitals and regions in the world? You've got, I think this is A, this is B, this is C, this is D, and this is E. So what we know about A, is A going to be highly developed, or is it going to be less developed? A is definitely going to be higher developed. It says on the map which one of the following boxes in an area where population density is high and level of economic development is low. So we know it can't be A. We can cross it off. B definitely has a very, very, very low level of economic development. What we know about the population density in Africa? Let's see. Milan says, I think India is more economically developed. It depends on your perspective there. Africa isn't developed as much, but the population development is low as well. So meaning, Rishi, that you're not seeing as much population density here, right? So you think C is the answer. C would be South Asia, which is going to be India, Bangladesh, Afghanistan. These are super dense areas that are also, we're looking at these and we're considering them to be developing countries. So absolutely. At best, you can say that India is going to be maybe an NIC, but there is huge chunks and regions within India that are going to be still very traditional, still very rural, still very, very developing. So the answer to this question is definitely going to be C, y'all. And the reason it's not B is not because it's not economically developed, but you're looking at a region here where the population density isn't that big. But wait a second, Fowler, you already said a few times ago that if you look at the pin code of the world, all right, so you got 1 billion people here, you got 1 billion people here, you got 4 billion people over here, okay? Where's the most growth going to occur in the next 100 years? Well, undoubtedly in Africa. Right now, this area is growing substantially, but they still mostly live in rural areas. They're still very, very dispersed in terms of the overall density compared to the rest of the world. You're going to see about 2 to 3 billion people in your lifetime live in Africa, but right now, those population densities are far lower. All right. You guys want to play the mess out of some Kahoot. Okay, so we have gone about an hour. We've looked at a lot of different examples of multiple choice. We can look through some more if you want. I know I have some questions I want to go in there and look at, so let me take a time out and do that real quick. And if you guys want to play Kahoot, I see y'all shared the link in the questions, so I guess I'm totally outnumbered here, and you might just have to do it real quick. Rimland and Heartland theory. Yes. All right. So there is a. We'll go through a few of these questions and then we'll look at some Kahoot. The Rimland and Heartland theory. This video here, if you go on YouTube and look that up, does a spectacular job of looking at the organic theory, the Rimland, the Heartland, all these different models of political geography. Does a very good job looking at them. in short, when you're looking at the Rimland theory, right, you're looking at this idea, or I'm sorry, the Heartland theory first. You're looking at the idea that whoever controls what they call the world island, which is basically Eurasia, okay, is going to have the ability, because of their control of the Rimland and the resources there to control the entire world. So it's basically a theory of world domination. It sounds very, very dramatic, but that's more or less what it was. And this dude named Halford Mackinder came up with this in the early 1900s. No one really thought that much of it until the Soviet Union emerged at the dawn of the Cold War, and now they have control of all this stuff. And it's like, wow, oh my gosh, this is happening. All right. But then you've kind of got a counter argument that is whoever controls the Rimland can actually stifle and control the Heartland, preventing those resources from going there. So the Rimland theory is kind of the opposite, the kryptonite of the Heartland theory, and is basically the motivation behind the policy of containment. In other words, the United States and their allies attempted to prevent the spread of communism by controlling the Rimland, preventing communism from happening in other countries near along the border there, and also, I mean, it became the policy of containment. It also was like the reason for the domino theory is the idea that if one country falls to communism, they all do. So at whatever cost, you want to prevent that from happening. That was the whole basis of the Cold War right there. All right, difference between GDP, GNP, and GNI. Remember, spatial perspective, okay? Nobody gives a crap about the difference between those three things, and I'll tell you, it's because they all more or less mean the same thing. In particular, GDP, gross national product, and GNI, gross national income. The only difference really between the two that you guys need to know for the sake of this course is that GNI accounts for income made from abroad in addition to just being made domestically. So if you take these numbers, it's basically the amount of revenue your country is going to make in all of its economic activities. The difference being domestic and this here being international. All right, they're used in the same way when you think about development. The more money your country makes divided by the population, the more each person gets to enjoy of that economic activity and that economic prosperity. That's how we use it as a measure of development. So I wouldn't really think about and try to wrap your mind around the differences between the numbers. Know that they all are kind of used in the same way as a measure and indicator of development. So don't worry about being able to define the difference. Just know that that's what they mean. If you have a question about the FRQ that asks you about something to do with this, again, you just use it as a indicator of development. The higher the amount of money you make divided by the amount of people there, the better you guys have, the better the development is, the better the human development is going to be in that country. All right, the Heartland, I just did that one a few minutes ago. If you don't know a question, do you have any tips on how to choose which answer or choice is best? Yeah, this here is what we're looking at with process elimination. The one I just looked at, I think the hardest question on this list of questions that we were just looking at is this one right here. And exactly what I said. You guys can almost always, if you really look at the questions carefully, you can almost always break it down so you can take at least one of the strategies out and guarantee it's not the right answer. Even doing that brings you up a 5% chance of guessing randomly if you have no idea on the other questions. So that's the main thing you're going to want to do right there is use that process of elimination. A huge amount of this is going to be knowing the material, obviously, but in terms of those marginal increases of your score, it's going to come down to strategies like that. Let's see. What's the periphery model? Okay, so the Galactic City model that I talked about at the very beginning of this presentation, one of the 4 North American urban models, the one made by Chauncey Harris, is an extension of the multiple nuclei model. That's the peripheral model. So it's also known as the Galactic City model, but they're the exact same thing. It just, as cars have emerged and these beltways along cities have emerged, you're going to start seeing edge cities or large urban areas on the outside of a main city that has retail and office space and all the other things that go with that. So that's the peripheral model right there. Could you go over types of diffusion, hierarchical, contagious, and stimulus? All right, so if you look back at the yesterdays, we modeled an FRQ and we actually looked at number 3 on the 2018 FRQ from last year. That's the one that I was a reader for when I went to Cincinnati. And we looked at all 3 of these. But in a nutshell, relocation happens whenever you move the trait, the part of the culture is being moved with people. So relocation only occurs with the movement of people. But any type of expansion diffusion, which is going to be hierarchical, contagious, and stimulus, not only does the phenomenon stay where it is, but it also expands from that point. And it can do it either hierarchically, contagiously, or through stimulus. Hierarchical is when maybe a fad starts off in a big city, and then eventually smaller places on the outside of those cities, eventually even rural areas are going to do it. That's the example of hierarchical diffusion. Contagious would be anything that's going to spread through a form of media or in a way that everyone, regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of socioeconomic background, is going to have equal access to it. Kind of like a cold or a disease. I mean, if you got the measles, it doesn't matter who you are, you have a chance of getting that, right? So that's contagious diffusion. So any kind of a viral video. A few years ago, there was the ice bucket challenge. That spread as a form of contagious diffusion. Okay, so it doesn't matter who you are, everyone was getting in on that. Stimulus diffusion is the one that I think is the most difficult for students to understand, because it's not like the idea itself is spreading, but some part of that idea that can be applied to a totally different idea is what's spreading. The best example here is if you look at fast food, or I guess one of many good examples, but my favorite is if you look at fast food and you think about how the drive-through revolutionized fast food. You don't have to get out of your car. You just pull around and get your food and leave. Drive-throughs eventually got pretty slow as you got 1 million people going through it. So different fast food companies have to figure out ways to increase the speed. And so McDonald's starts having these 2 ordering kiosks followed by 2 windows. It's still a fast food window, but McDonald's made some changes to it, kept the original concept, and went in this direction to speed up the line. Chick-fil-A, on the other hand, they sometimes will have double kiosks, but usually, in my experience, they're going to have 1 window and and maybe 2 lines, but then they also will put workers actually in the line to take your order and speed up the process. And usually it works really, really well. So both still are kind of ringing true to the original idea of the drive-through, but the way they went about adapting it is different between McDonald's and Chick-fil-A. That's stimulus diffusion. You take the overarching idea and make it kind of relate to your own thing. That's what we're looking at for stimulus diffusion. Okay, a few more. Rank size rule. Yes, this one here is a really important one. I did cover this in one of our urban geography reviews. I didn't cover it in our cumulative review. So you'd want to look back at one of the later Thursday reviews that I did before we started getting into full swing review mode. But rank size rule is going to occur when you have kind of a equal, I guess, distribution, or it represents an equal distribution of the wealth in your country. So let's look at the United States. You've got your biggest city in the U.S. is New York City. The second largest city in the U.S. is going to be L.A., and the third largest is Chicago. According to the rank size rule, and again, you're never going to see this as exact science, but according to the rule, you would take your largest city in the country, all right, and then the second largest would be approximately 1/2 the size of the first largest, and then the third largest would be approximately 1/3 the size of the first largest, and then the fourth largest, which I think is going to be Dallas or Austin or something like that, is going to be 1/4, and so on and so forth. Well, regardless of how picture perfect this ends up being, and it's not always going to be exact, it tends to demonstrate that there is access to different kinds of services, medical services, wealth, whatever it may be, across the country as a whole. Whereas if you look at another city, Mexico City, the capital of Mexico, it is a primate city. Almost all of that country's wealth is centered in Mexico City. The next most important city in that country is extremely small in terms of its wealth, influence, and population. So that's really what the rank size rule means, is that usually in cities where in countries where this works out, there's going to be a better and more evenly distribution of the wealth in the country. You have slides that explains Latin American urban model. I have the one that that I just had up here. Let me see if I can figure out. I guess I closed it. This one right here. Now, I'm not gonna lie. Miss Amanda had to sit in on a few of these. So she did a couple of these reviews with you whenever I was recovering from ACL reconstruction. So she should have covered the models. I'm pretty sure it was one of the topics that she would have done for y'all. And so you'd have to go back and look at the reviews that she did with you in order to get that. But, and I don't have one for Latin American, but I do have 3 YouTube videos that I did on my Professor Dustin YouTube channel. And currently, the videos that I have that get the most traffic are my urban models. I didn't do one, didn't have time to do one on the Latin American model. So I wish I would have. Let's see, anyone can view. Copy link. All right, so here's the one that here's what I have, and this here is again the same one that I shared with y'all yesterday. That's the link to the slides I'm looking at right now. All right, so examples of cities in each urban city model. You know, someone actually asked me this on one of my videos that I did, and it's hard. I mean, without looking at that or without just knowing it, you'd have to look at a huge amount of data and apply this, or at least guess by using a map of the structure, having to do with population and economic wealth and industries and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, Chicago is definitely a model that was applied to. You look at Chicago for both concentric zone and the Hoyt model. They both use Chicago for that. For the multiple nuclei model, I don't really know. And again, I don't think the point is to know individual cities that are going to relate to these. I'm just going to be honest. I don't know. The main thing always is going to be the spatial context. So you want to be able to understand why this is important in terms of how those cities emerge, with the differences between the zones where the poor and the rich are going to be, where the industries are going to be located, and how, you know, all of those things having to do with the spatial perspective. That's the main thing you want to remember about any of these models, to be honest with you. All right, I'm going to try to do some research and see if I can figure out or track down some individual cities that you can use to look at these. Do you suggest going back over your answers if you finished early on the multiple choice, or just using it all up and not going back? Honestly, that depends on how you feel. If you have questions that you marked that you need to go back and look at, go back and look at it. But you do not want to make the habit of second guessing what you put, because that's going to cause doubt. It's going to hurt your confidence, and usually, I mean, I don't think it's really that helpful. So I wouldn't go back and look over it just to look over it. If there's something that you choose in there that you want to look at, that you mark that you want to go back and look at, then definitely do that. But I wouldn't go back and just reread answers, because it's going to cause you to second guess what you have. All right, Professor Dustin is yeah, that's correct. So my YouTube channel is literally called Professor Dustin. It is all one word. And if you Google that, you'll see a picture of me, and you'll see the human geography link. So yeah, that's it, absolutely. So you know, I've got some things on there that are better than others for sure, and it's definitely not complete. There are other really good YouTube videos. I would say that another one you want to look at is anything from Dan Snyder. He's got a spectacular AP Human Geography section on his YouTube channel, where he also does world history and all that kind of stuff. Just fantastically to the point, very well done. I would say that his YouTube channel is way better than mine. My urban models videos, I think, are pretty good. He's got basically the whole course in like a PowerPoint kind of format, and he has a really good presentation voice and has some weird, quirky stuff he puts in there that'll keep you laughing or wondering what the heck. But I would definitely take a look at that too if you want. Usually his videos are about 7 to 10 minutes long. All right. Can a primate city follow the ring size rule? Never, ever, ever, because they're fundamentally different. A primate city is going to be one super large city, usually way more influential than the next in terms of population as well as in terms of economic prosperity. So you will never see a time where you're going to have a primate city and the rank size rule in one area. Now, wait. You can see them maybe at different scales. So if you're looking at a particular region of the United States and not the U.S. as a whole, then you might can say, if you look at just the North Atlantic, you might can say that New York would be a primate city just within that one region. But even that, I don't think would work out that well. So usually, if you're looking at the same region, apples to apples, no, you're never going to see a time where a primate city is going to follow the ring size rule. Let's see, how many questions should we get correct in order to score a 4 out of 5? Percentage-wise, I usually see somewhere between 60 and 65 if you want to be a good place to do decently on the FRQ and make a 4 on the exam. You guys should all have it as a goal to make a 4, even though most of you aren't going to do that. The statistically about, it's actually in this article here, I want to say statistically about maybe 25 or so % of people make a 4. Now, about half the population of people taking the test is going to make a 3 or above. So the odds are still really, really good you're going to pass. And don't look at the odds and say, oh, God, I mean, 50% of people are going to fail the test, and I'm going to be in that 50%. That's definitely not the way you want to look. All right? The school average over the years was 4.13. That's a fantastic school average. I would not say that it was that high at my school, for better or for worse. But yeah, you definitely want to make a 4 if you can, because all colleges that accept AP are going to accept a 4 for college credit. Do you suggest going over a topic related to content tonight and tomorrow, or doing practice FRQs, MC questions? And if so, what websites do you recommend for MC practice? Let's see. I always tell my students to work on what they're the weakest on. Right? So if I have, if students are weak on population, that's what they should study, hands down. And the way you do that should be whatever you think is going to be the best bang for the buck with the time you've got left. So do I say do nothing but FRQs at this point? Probably not. Nothing but multiple choice? No. I would probably spend most of your time focusing on what you're weakest and looking at it from a bunch of different ways. Maybe read a little bit of that, maybe practice some multiple choice, maybe answer a part of an FRQ having to do with it, but really make sure to maximize your time to get the best bang for the buck. This late in the game, it may be really beneficial to do FRQ, especially if you haven't already, but it might be more helpful to study vocab or answer multiple choice questions on that topic if you think that's where you're going to struggle the most. So it really just depends on how you feel going into it, to be honest. Websites, what websites do I recommend for multiple choice? I know if you can get in and play some of the Kahoots, that would be good. Quizlet has flashcards. If that's something that works well for you, then great. A lot of you have made flashcards. That would be a really good way to get vocab that could help you on multiple choice as well. I would say that the number one thing I would recommend is probably spend some time in your review manual. Make sure that you've done all the multiple choice questions there, and maybe even get with a partner and quiz each other. I also can't. I think a really cool resource is the iScore 5 app. I know some of the people who have worked in development for those questions, and it's pretty good. It is a $5 purchase if I remember correctly, but it gives you a lot of exposure to multiple choice as well as FRQs that I think probably do the best job I've ever seen at emulating the actual test, because many of those questions are written by people who were on the FRQ writing staff before. All right, so I actually have answered this and forgot to hit it for timestamp. All right, what should we bring when we go take the exam? Yes, you want a blue or black pen for the FRQ. You're gonna do like a Scantron type thing that they're going to provide you for the multiple choice. I would bring like something to read if they'll let you do that when you're in between. I don't really know what the policy is for that. You will get a break in between. You will be able to eat a snack during that break. So bring something that isn't gonna get nasty or go bad in your book bag, like a granola bar or something like this. I would say the most important thing you want to do is wake up in the morning and drink a cup of coffee, if that's your thing. Eat a good breakfast, man. I mean, I would scramble up an egg or two and eat that. Get some with a lot of protein. It's going to keep you full the whole time. Just do your best. Have a good morning. Get up early. Don't think you guys spend all your time studying, reviewing, but do what you gotta do to get the best. Luke, man, if you want to eat burgers, man, that's kind of my style. I eat a burger all day long, So if you want to wake up, drink some coffee, eat burgers, go for it. Cereal, sure. I mean, just whatever it is. 1 year, Rishi, I brought in donuts for my students and coffee, and it was pretty fantastic, and they were all happy about it. Today it makes me want to throw up thinking about eating kid food like that for breakfast. But absolutely, whatever floats your boat. Chick-fil-A is definitely good stuff, as is bananas. So let me go ahead and timestamp that. Just a few more. Any ideas what units the FRQ topics could be from? No, I have no idea. But me and a buddy of mine were looking a couple of days ago and noticed that there was a Unit 7 on the last 2 FRQs. So you might can say, they're probably not going to put a Unit 7 on this one. There has not been a Unit 6 question asked in several years, is my understanding. So you might see something that might be centered on maybe a Unit 6. I really don't have any idea, as nobody does. I mean, it's just a matter of random guessing. It could be anything on that course description. So that's really what you got to think about there. Let's see. Have you finished grading the FRQs we were able to submit on Schoology page? All right. So for those, Danny, what I intended to do last night was grade them with you. I was going to use the marking rubric and grade those. I had so many problems with my OneNote, and also there was a storm here. I guess that was affecting my internet, and I actually had to bail out once. And then also, by the end of it all, I couldn't get OneNote to stay open, so I kind of gave up with that. So yeah, I had them all on that OneNote ready to go, and I didn't get a chance to do that with you. So I'm very, very sorry about it. However, we did go through that FRQ, and we did grade the one we did together. So that what I would suggest doing, honestly, is go in, look at your response, and actually do what we did. Use that rubric to see where you scored points, and be honest with yourself, and see how you have done. That's what I would definitely suggest you doing. That's the whole purpose of me wanting those responses for sure. But I'm definitely very sorry that I didn't get a chance to look at that with you last night. That's the first time I did FRQ practice like that. We were A-okay. I didn't have any kind of connectivity issues. But last night it really rocked my world. All right, so let's take a look at this Kahoot and see what we got. I'm gonna take a quick swig of my drink. I'm logging in right now. Let's see what it does. Come on. Well, it's trying to log me in here. I'm going to pull it up in Firefox and see if that will get me there quicker. No, that's not right. Oh, give me just a second. Sorry about this. All right, cool. Let's close this out. Okay, let's do that. I'm going to pull this over real quick. So now let me come in here and grab the link again. Okay. All right. Oh, I'm not paying for Kahoot today. All right, here we go. I tried so hard to get into Fortnite. You know, I suck. I don't understand how you gotta build stuff. I mean, I guess, man, I guess I'm just an old man. I'm having a hard time getting to the. Let me see if I can just look it up. I play a let's see what this is. I play a game on my phone called The Alchemist Code, and man, it's you know, I can play on my phone because I can get my kids to, you know, I can sit there on my phone and I can turn it off whenever my kids start calling or being needy, or if my wife needs something. But man, if I'm sitting there trying to play like Fortnite or something, I'm playing online. You know, I have to stop. My kids have a boo-boo on the knee or whatever it might be, and so it's easier for me to play phone games. I'm actually pretty good at the Alchemist Code, which is probably not anything to brag about. Okay, so I'm looking at one. This here is 40 questions long. I have no idea what I'm looking at. I just pulled it up at random. Questions look kind of legit. Look kind of legit to me. Y'all want to play this one? Look legit to me. All right, so here we go. Let's bring it up. We're going to play. Boom. All right, so all right. There we go. I didn't check my settings, so hopefully my settings aren't terrible. Oh. I just noticed for the first time since I've had my ACL surgery, I just crossed my leg. I don't know if that was a good idea. Now I feel super stiff. All right, so okay, I see what you mean. My face is okay. Let's see. Let me go face that way. Yeah, I don't want to give you like an unfair advantage for sure. A little bit more. It does the power in the house. Yeah, boy. All right. There we go. Is that better? You guys can all see that good? All right, you guys ready to start? I'm not sure how many people I have. All right, here we go. We're going to go ahead and we're going to start this junk up. Boom. All right. Here we go, guys. Crank it up. There should be an easy one for you guys. Bam. Good job. As expected. All right. Good job. Oh, I gotta hit next. Population pyramid looks like an upside down triangle. This area has a large percentage of I bet you guys are all hoping for questions like that on the AP exam tomorrow. Wouldn't that be great? There we go. Good job. And the reason here is because if it's upside down triangle, then it's showing that most people are living to be old, and you're not having a whole lot of youths to replace that. So it actually would be, and the word for that is elderly dependency ratio. So it would be a high elderly dependency ratio there. Which of the following is the best example of folk culture? Huh. Heck yeah, good job. Even the Amish sometimes will sell things like belts and furniture and things like that. It's a really good. And also you can go to local places and get things. Which of the following countries is not one of the 4 Asian tigers? Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Vietnam. Down there might be a little bit more tricky. Bam. Yes, Vietnam is not one of the traditional. The other one would have been South Korea. Good job, Zeph. Which statement would best fit a European city? All right, let's take a look. European cities have large. I'll let you guys read it. Huh. All right, good. That's the one I would have thought there too. And the reason for that, by the way, is when you're looking at it would have been between me. It would have been the pollution problems and that. But the reason it's going to be this is because remember, European cities are old, so the ancient CBD is going to be what has been there all this time. And to modernize, they had to move those skyscrapers, which make up the CBD of North American models or cities, into the suburban regions. So that's the reason for that. Kind of uses nuclear power for a greater percentage of its total power output. Again, a continent. Bam. All right, so a lot of you put North America for that. We're very much like a natural gas kind of place. Europe, you think about France. You think about Iceland is more geothermal. You think about Great Britain, for example. A lot of these places are very, especially France, is the one I think about more than any of them, is very high on nuclear. All right. The majority of the entrants into the United Nations came from where during the 1960s? So when we say entrants, you're talking about people who joined the United Nations. Came from where during the 1960s? Wow, I would have missed that as well. That's not what I was thinking. I was thinking Europe, guys. I'm right there with you guys. I was thinking Europe for that one. Interesting. Okay, individual characteristics of a place that make it unique defines which term most accurately. This here would be one of those you'd want to use context. If you know what those words mean, I'm pretty sure this one here becomes obvious. Connor, I'll see you later, man. Yeah, we'll be up here tomorrow night for sure. Wow. Individual characteristics of a place that make it. All right, I don't like that question. That's not all how I would have wanted to define a folk culture. I would have thought that since you're talking about site factors there, you would have looked at built environments. That's a crappy question before you guys get all beat up about that. Sorry, I didn't make it. That's a crappy question. All right, farming today in MDCs is a transition period. What transition is occurring? Farming today in MDCs, more developed countries, is in a transition period. Huh. All right, I think I know the answer. No, that's not what I would put. That's a weird question too. We associate the mechanization or the industrialization of farming with the second industrial revolution, which actually occurred with the industrial revolution. I would have thought, however, with the ongoing technological advances, that the answer would have been the mechanization. I'm not really sure. Again, that's a weird question for me. I actually think something like that. I want to know where that question came from, because they were just talking about a question just like that on the APHUG Geography teachers page. MDCs, no, I don't agree with that. Sorry, I just don't. Because we were a third agricultural revolution, that was second agricultural. Yeah, that's true. But industrialization of agriculture, we've been doing that for hundreds of years. So I don't really know. I'd have to have more information on what they mean by that. Because I don't agree with that. All right. Prior to the first agricultural revolution, what were humans doing for food? Eating donuts, yeah. Hunting and gathering, yep. It's obviously blue. Okay. Von Thunen's model of agricultural land use is centered on what basic concept? Huh. The farmer sells all of their farm production to a market. That's a weird way to craft that question. It's a weird way to craft that question. I mean, sure, I wouldn't have written it like that. Yeah, don't worry, Luke. I was confused too. Why not red? What was red, Danny? Was that the one that was asking about the heavier materials or the lighter ones? Lighter would be toward the outside for sure because of the transportation. The farmer's concerned about cost of land and cost of transportation in Von Thun. All right, Central Park in New York City is a good example of. Ooh. A festival landscape. I'm with you guys. I would have guessed a green belt on that because it sounds like, I mean, I actually was reading about that just the other day. I don't think they used the word green belt, but what I was looking at certainly didn't use the word festival landscape. Makes sense though, but it would be like a green space if nothing else. That was an interesting question as well. Which of the following traits fit the definition of an Islamic city? Okay. I think it's a circle, similar to the African stadium mile. But nope. I would have missed that one as well. Interesting. We didn't look at the Islamic city, did we? I would have missed that one too. Area around sub-Saharan agricultural regions is adversely affected by what environmental issues? El Nino is a condition that occurs mainly in affects Latin America and even North America to some extent, having to do with wind currents and things like this. It's something that's going to affect the Western Hemisphere, not so much Africa. Desertification is definitely the answer to this one, hands down. Global warming might have an adverse effect on desertification, but the answer to that question is desertification. Which transportation would fruit production in South America for market in the U.S. need to use? What transportation would fruit production in South America for market in the U.S. need to use? So weird. I guess they were running out of space for that question. All right. I actually covered that when we looked at this whole concept. It was around Valentine's Day because I showed y'all a picture of a cargo plane that was carrying flowers for us to give to our bays, right? And so definitely airplanes. And the reason is because these are market goods. These are like it would be the equivalent of market gardening. So this is stuff that's going to spoil if it sits on a shipping barge for a super long amount of time. It would definitely be airplanes because of that. All right, the border between the United States and Canada along the 49th parallel is what kind of boundary? It's a good question. All right. Yeah, the boundary was created prior to the population being there, right? I think it should have been a subsequent boundary. I think I have to look back and see if I'm getting those just mixed up in my head. But the boundary existed prior to the people actually moving in there. I'd have to look. I don't know why I'm having a blank on that. What country has the largest coal reserves in the world? Coal reserves in the world. If you watch the news. Right, yeah, definitely United States. We're like the Southwest Asia of coal, if you think about that. Problem with coal is that it pollutes the mess out of the environment, so we try not to use it so much. Still, when President Trump was running for office, he wanted to bring a lot of that back in order to stimulate our economy because it's cheap and we have tons of it. Which of the following religions is a monotheistic religion? Monotheistic. Judaism, yeah. Judaism and Zoroastrianism are the two oldest monotheistic religions. Judaism is probably the most important simply because Christianity and Islam are also monotheistic and come from it. What stage of demographic transition has highest growth rates? Definitely stage 2. Remember, the spread between the death rates and the birth rates drop. It causes a bigger gap between the two, which is your natural increase. So yes, definitely stage 2 there. Stage 3, it continues to grow because of demographic momentum. What two areas are the hearts of the world's 5 primary religions? All right. Northern India and Southwest Asia. I would have called that South Asia and Southwest Asia. But yeah, Northern India is still part of that. That's where Hinduism and Buddhism would have emerged. Both of those would have been from this basic region here. Southwest Asia is the same as saying the Middle East, which is where Judaism, Christianity, Islam emerged. Thailand is the best example of which type of political shape. Yeah, so state morphology, shapes of states. Which one would Thailand be? All right, it is indeed corrupted. All right, so this here is covered, I want to say, in the Rubenstein book. Hamlet's being very, very small. I looked at this also in one of my presentations. Actually, when we got, I think it was the first thing I looked at with cities in Unit 7. Hamlets, villages, towns, cities, metropolis. Any variation of that would be correct. Hamlets are usually extremely small, maybe a building or two. Just very, very small settlements, not a whole lot of people living there. Something way smaller than what we would typically think about in terms of where people are going to live. Which religion is fastest growing in the world's 5 primary religions? Like Islam, definitely the fastest growing. Definitely the fastest growing. A lot of y'all put what, Christianity for that? Yeah, Islam is growing way faster. Actually, a lot of places where Christianity prevails is becoming more and more secular, such as Europe and even North America. The greatest percentage of people in the world participate in which kind of agriculture? Yeah, subsistence agriculture. Absolutely. Absolutely. Good job. Abby is dominating. Oh, I just mentioned that to you guys. Good job. The following city is classified as a world city. All right, so all of those would be, but one of them is going to be more influential, like a better example of the than the rest. Yeah, London, New York is the most influential. London and Tokyo, those 3 are the most influential world cities in the world by a landslide. They are like the cities that control most of the world's economy. All right, which of the following is best example of a nation state? Nation state. Now, if you know regionally where a lot of these nation states are, there would be one that would be easier to find for sure. Denmark. Yep, absolutely. Perfect. Perfect. Awesome. Which of these 5 regions is not one of the most populated areas of the world? All right. Yep. South America. And northeastern United States is the most densely populated region in the Western Hemisphere. Central Europe, East Asia definitely have tons of people there. A very, very dense population as well. A 30th parallel in Korea is an example of NAN. Yeah. The border there comes as a proxy war during the Cold War. The communist North and the South, which was supported by capitalist, or I guess democracy governments, the United States. The line barely really even moved as the war raged on. It was a superimposed boundary. All right, real quick, I got a couple of questions here I want to look at in the last few minutes we got. One is Shintoism. Shintoism is a ethnic religion that is really only practiced in Japan. It's like their ethnic religion. It is also a syncretic religion that is often blended together with Buddhism. So a syncretic religion is a type of religion that you can take elements of one, blend it with another, and kind of still be true to both of them. So Christianity is not syncretic. We don't like to say, hey, we believe in Jesus, but we also believe in all these other different religions and philosophies. So that's what Shinto is that. And many people that practice Shinto also practice it in conjunction with Buddhism. It is kind of centered on the idea of maybe ancestor worship, as well as different types of like spirits and things like this. So it's also kind of like animism in a way as well, but ethnic religion of Japan. There are movies, like anime movies and things like that, where you see that pretty prevalent as well. What is a pro-representative state? A pro-representative state, that's a type of shape of state. In other words, a form of state morphology. Morphology being the shape of something, in which you've got basically a compact state, but you've got this proruption, or this thing, like piece of land sticking out of it, that usually serves some kind of a economic purpose. Sometimes you'll see it as a way to keep a country from being landlocked. Sometimes, like in the case of Afghanistan, this little proruption there that prevents like a political barrier or a buffer between two countries that might not like each other very much. Okay, what is that? What is demarcation line? I think what you're probably talking about here. All right, so when you use a line to demarcate like a boundary, you're looking at maybe an invisible line of latitude or longitude or whatever it might be. There's also, when you're looking at the Treaty of Tordesillas, which used what they call the line of demarcation, which was a line of map that was a followed line of longitude that marked the Portuguese and the Spanish territories during the Age of Exploration. Spanish got everything to the west of the line, Portuguese got everything to the east of the line. So I'm not sure if you're asking about that specific line of demarcation, but generally speaking, a demarcation line is going to be that kind of imaginary line that goes across the territory that separates it from something else. All right. Do we have any more CRAM sessions? Yes. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be on. Let me make sure I know what time it is. I think it's 7. I don't even know, honestly. But yeah, I will be here tomorrow night. Does anybody know what time it's scheduled for tomorrow night? 7 Central. Okay, so if it's 7 Central, so that'll be 8 Eastern. Wow, that's later than I thought. Yeah, I'll be here. And honestly, while we're talking about that, the main focus of tomorrow night is going to be I'm going to tell you guys some very last minute things, stuff like just the main thing I'm going to tell you is get a good night's sleep, eat a good breakfast. Don't spend too much time trying to save the world after the CRAM session tomorrow night. The main thing I want to do, honestly, is any questions you guys have, go ahead and write them down over the course of today, tomorrow. Bring them with you. I'll answer anything you want to know, anything about testing strategies, anything about multiple choice, FRQ, any kind of content type questions, anything you guys have questions about. That's the main thing I'm planning on doing tomorrow night. I don't think we're going to go much more, maybe an hour or so, because I think really what you guys are going to need tomorrow night is encouragement and just some last minute stuff. But I think you've already got what you need in order to do well on the test. So that's really the plan. Nothing super fancy. So y'all bring any questions you have, and we'll take a look at those. Okay, let's look at. We got about 4 or 5 more minutes. We'll answer just a couple more questions. Okay, we got through question 30 of 40. So, which region has the fewest languages that are under threat of extinction? Huh. Yeah, I think Europe would have to be the answer, because I can only think of maybe the Basque or whatnot. The Americas, you got almost every Native American language. So that's the reason why the Americas wouldn't be it. Usually you think about this and you're like, well, Spanish and English. But yeah, Europe would have probably the least amount that are in danger, because most people there are speaking Indo-European language. What economist was the first person to predict a population crisis? Thanos! I appreciate that. You know, I love teaching. I love teaching this class, and so, you know, you might not think that if I was a teacher over your class. You know, sometimes it's easier to hear something from someone through a video when I'm not there to pester you about stuff like homework and writing and all that. So, but I do appreciate it. I've enjoyed working with you guys this year for sure. Thomas Malthus is the answer to that question for sure. Thanos wasn't the first guy. The second agricultural revolution coincided with. This is one we talked about for sure. Bam, the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution is the answer to that question. 853324 is in the lead. Abby is closing in closely. Which of the following countries is an enclave? All right. A vocab word here. There you go. An enclave is a fancy way of saying a territory kind of completely enclosed within another territory. You can look at this at different scales as well. So you might have you can consider a Chinatown to be an enclave, also an ethnic neighborhood within a city. All right. We'll do one more, and this is going to finish us up. Southeast agencies have promoted economic growth through what primary means? Is definitely an enclave. It's going to be a territory completely surrounded within another territory. So Lesotho is a country that literally exists within South Africa. Chinatown would be a territory that's all like surrounded by the rest of the city. So either one of those would be a good example of an enclave. All right. So yes, Western investment and trade. If you look at the international trade model that Rubenstein talks about, that kind of is the way that the Asian tigers went about in development. That's what you're looking at there, Western investment and trade. All right, so let's look and see what the leaderboard is. Bam. Looks like we got a clear winner. Good job, 853324. I have a quick question, and we're going to end here. The difference between an exclave and an enclave. An exclave, really there's not a whole lot of difference in the way we were looking at it from a spatial perspective, but an exclave is going to be a piece of a country that would be separated by a another country. So a good example of this is if you look at Russia, Kaliningrad is going to be separated by like Estonia or whatever is up there. It's going to be isolated from the rest of the country. So that's the main difference there, guys. Go forth and be merry. All right, you got one more day. Do what you gotta do. Work on your weaknesses. Get with your people. I'm definitely gonna tell her Happy Mother's Day for sure. Thank you, Danielle. I'll make sure she knows it came from you. And hey, you guys did great tonight. And I know you're gonna all do awesome on the FRQ, on the multiple choice, on the test in general. So I'll see you guys tomorrow night for our last CRAM session, and then it's nothing standing in front of you other than to go in there and do what you're gonna do and make a 4 or 5 on the AP exam. So peace out. You guys have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow.